But
Good afternoon. This is Robert Cornicelli, National President for Veterans for America First. And with me today, I say this often enough when I do these interviews. Mostly we're interviewing veterans or military retirees, but this guy is the real deal. And I have the utmost respect for Marines, especially Marines who retired 30 years, I believe. Colonel Markert is exactly what this country needs in the U.S. Senate in Colorado. And I'll tell you, and I tell a lot of people this, when you're raising young boys, and my son's 11, you try to show them or introduce them to people who you want them to grow up to be like. And Colonel Markert, from what I've read, is exactly what I would want my son to grow up to be like. Not like these people you see Obama with the spaghetti arms throwing the pitches like he never held a ball in his life. This is a real man. And what he's going to do, in my estimation, is bring back masculinity so young boys can look up and say, that's what I want to be like. I don't have to believe masculinity is toxic, that God put masculinity into my system so I can protect my family and protect those around me. So, Colonel, it is an absolute honor to have you. Before we even start, there's no doubt about it. You will have our endorsement for the rest of your life. You are a hero in my eyes. And you are what every young boy in this country, probably this world, should look to on what a man is and how a man should act and what a man should do for his country. So welcome.
well, thanks. I appreciate that, and thanks for your time and the opportunity to be here. And you're very kind in your praise. I would say the credit actually goes to my father and grandfather, who were both 25 plus year Navy officers that served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and Desert Storm. And they raised me by setting an example, and I followed that by joining the Marines. And my life has been completely characterized by service and sacrifice, as was theirs. And our whole family is dedicated to that. They're into freedom and defending this country, and we want to make sure that we set a great example for all citizens. But like you said, raising strong young men to lead, to take care of their families, to operate effectively in society, and to be patriots.
And nothing against someone who served 4 years or 8 years in the military. You served 30 in the Marines.
Mhm.
That's a testament to who you are. That's tough. That means you have everything in order, and you know what success is. You know how to teach others what success is in accomplishing the mission. And I think that's especially the Senate. The House, I believe the House should be made up of everyone. When back in the day there were coppersmiths and cobblers, and it's supposed to be the people's house. But in the Senate, you need real leaders, proven leaders. It's not just someone who, you know, me, one day maybe, but it's got to be proven leaders. And 30 years in the Marines, a colonel, you have what it takes.
That's a fantastic point. A few months ago, I reread the Federalist Papers. And if you go in and read James Madison, Federalist number 63, and he talks about the national character, which is, patriotism, achievement, innovation, things like that. And the way they saw that back in the late 1700s. And in there he talks about the U.S. Senate and senators in particular representing the national character and also using that as a way to message and deter our adversaries and say, America essentially is not to be messed with because these people are going to hold the line to make sure that we stay free and do the things they need to do as a government to, carry out the will of the people. And so it's something that I took to heart and something that I practice every single day and plan to live up to that when elected.
There's no doubt in my mind you will. Now, we were talking earlier, this is a winnable race, and
Mhm.
I looked this stuff up. I like to know you would have gotten it anyway, and you will always get it, even if you were running in Massachusetts. But this is a winnable race because and I was saying earlier, 3.5 to maybe 4 million more Republicans voted in 2020 than they did in 2022. So there's 3 to 4 million voters that have voted red out there, that whoever ran in 2022 was unable to attract to the polls. So you
Yeah.
did win this.
Yeah,
And
oh, sorry. So, the demographics here are interesting. Colorado is unique. Because 50% of the voters are unaffiliated, right? So we've got an equal number of Democrats and Republicans registered in the state, but everybody says, oh, Colorado is deep blue. Colorado is not deep blue. The elected officials and their policies are, but the voters are not. And, you talk to a lot of these unaffiliated voters, most of them, are like, yeah, they actually espouse conservative ideals. It's like, what is it that they want, out of a government? What do they want out of life? They want to be able to take care of their family, have a job, afford a home, take a vacation, go to church. Very, very basic things, and obviously ensure that their constitutional rights are not infringed upon, which here they routinely are. And so they're looking for somebody that can step up and provide the common sense policies that that will truly represent them because that fringe radical left element is very, very small, but they've got a loud voice because it's amplified, as you know, by the media. But otherwise, you've got basically 3 million voters that could potentially vote red. And really, if you look at the numbers from the last race in the Senate in 2020, is really only shifting about 200,000 or 300,000 people that voted blue for some reason who are unaffiliated over to red. That's really it. Everyone else, if they stayed the same, you're going to get a much better outcome. And so, really, there's a certain set of neighborhoods and areas along the Front Range of Colorado, basically from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs, where you can go in there, pass the message along, and all of my public appearances, and I've got one tonight actually. Everybody's, I mean, they're like, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. I mean, I've gotten very, very favorable feedback from just about everybody I've talked to like, we're waiting for this. We're waiting for someone that's actually going to go in and lead and serve and hold the line in Congress and not go in and flip flop and basically say one thing, but then do another. Someone that actually is going to, demonstrate some integrity. And so, it's actually, as long as we can get the message out, and let people know what we stand for and that we'll represent them, then, it's actually, like you said, very, very winnable. It's just that that kind of person hasn't come along in a long time.
I was talking to Lieutenant Governor Evett here in South Carolina. I'm actually from New York, but I'm one of
Mhm.
those people who said I have to get out.
Yeah.
I want my parental rights secured. I don't want to
Mhm.
have to go into a doctor's office and find out that my 14, she's now 15-year-old daughter needs to go into a doctor's office without me and be given the options of certain care, or go into a school and be told things that I don't agree with in my home and my wife doesn't agree with.
Right.
So we moved to South Carolina, and I think it's the same with Colorado. I think a lot of people who just want to be left alone are moving to states like Colorado, South Carolina. Not because they're far left or they're far right. They just want to be left alone, raise their family, and do all the things you just said. But at
Yeah.
Veterans for America First, we tend to only support veterans who are running. We'll support someone else if there's not a veteran and there's no other veteran in the race, unless it's a Democrat, then we will never support them. But we try to pass legislation as well.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you heard of the HALO bill, hands off law
Yes.
enforcement, passed in Florida. I wrote that bill in 2017 and tried to get it passed in New York, but it was called the 3-Foot Safety Act.
Mhm.
And I really started pushing it after the Summer of Love, and you saw the people in the face of cops with their phones. And I
Right.
realized, as an infantry officer, what if he had to pull his weapon and there's
Yeah.
someone right here?
Mhm.
What if it was ESU? They couldn't pull their weapon with someone in front of them. So, one, it's dangerous for the civilian. It's definitely dangerous for the law enforcement officer. But what if there's someone else was in need and they couldn't get past people who were lined up inches from them? And in New York, obviously, it goes nowhere. When I came down to South Carolina 2 years ago, I started sending this bill to elected officials in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. I testified in front of the Georgia Senate to get it passed there, and Lieutenant Evett had me speak in front of the Lieutenant Governors Association, the Republican Lieutenant Governors Association, to get this passed in at least all the red states where we have a trifecta. But then as I did research, I realized that the federal government can write a national halo law and the states cannot write a law to counter it. So if the federal
Mm,
government writes a national halo law saying you must go 25 feet back from a law enforcement officer, if when they say step back or else it's an
sure.
obstruction charge, someone in Massachusetts can't write a law saying no, you can come within 3 feet. So it's something that we should look into to say, hey, I mean, even though we are Veterans for America First, we have a lot of cops within our
Hmm.
ranks. We have to make sure nobody comes in the way of a law enforcement officer doing their job.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you talk about interest of, not only, the execution of the law enforcement officer's duties, public safety, but also officer safety. You probably heard of the 21-foot rule, that somebody can cover 21 feet in 1 second, and
Yeah.
endanger that officer who is, distracted trying to do something. Somebody can come at him from behind or whatever. Um, and I actually, one of my jobs as a colonel, I commanded all the Marines on Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and we trained military police. For 2 years, I trained thousands and thousands of military police officers, and so learned everything from police tactics, non-lethal weapons, all kinds of things. And so gained a deep appreciation for, the dilemmas that law enforcement face every day, out in public, because we saw that on bases and stations and things like that. And I learned a lot about policing. And obviously, like you said, there are so many veterans that have entered law enforcement, either at federal level or state, local, and are out there putting their lives on the line every day. And we need to protect them, in addition to allow them to, basically be unconstrained in terms of the execution of their duties. Particularly these days with, you not only people filming, but, people feel emboldened by, rhetoric and other things like that to be disrespectful to law enforcement for whatever reason. There's an undercurrent of that in our society. And I think that's flat out wrong. And we need to do something to protect them.
Yeah, so and you're right. The 21-foot reactionary gap, it changed from 3 feet to 21 when I was down in Georgia, and one of the senators, Senator Robinson, who was a law enforcement officer before he retired, said, let's change this because law enforcement officers are taught that someone can get at you with a weapon, like you said, within a second or two in 21 feet.
Mhm.
Why train an officer to react at 21 feet when you're saying they could be within 3 feet? So
Mhm.
it changed at 21. Then they're like, let's just make it 25 because iPhones, these new phones can have perfect recording from 21 feet.
Sure.
I also said, when you're driving your car and you have a nice safety space between you and the person in front of you, what's the first thing you feel when someone cuts into that space? Like they took away your safety.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you
Anger,
react?
frustration. Yeah, yeah.
Can you react now to people stomping on the brakes? A cop has to go through that every single day. I
Mhm.
can't react. And if you look at federal buildings where no weapons are allowed, there are weapons in there. And it's the police officers who carry those weapons. So if you let someone get too close to someone in a federal building, if they're smart, if someone really wants to cause damage, they're going to come in and they're going to try to take the weapon from the law enforcement officer.
Mhm.
So that's basically why we did it. Now, the other thing I wrote was the Veterans First Act of 2025, and I'll send that to you. But there's so many things within our government that make it harder for veterans to succeed out here. And I'll give you an example. If you're 100% service connected disabled, you get TRICARE for life.
Mhm.
But it says TRICARE for life. It doesn't say TRICARE till you're 65.
Yeah, right.
TRICARE for
Right.
life.
Yeah. Mhm.
Why do they shift you to Medicare
Mhm.
when you go on Social Security? Now you get paid premiums for injuries that you sustain while you're on the surface. So one thing I think we need to look at is that TRICARE for life stays TRICARE for life. You should never
Mhm.
have to go on Medicare. You served your time. You're 100% service connected. I have had 13 surgeries. I just came
Mhm.
off one 2 weeks ago with my crutches. I'm supposed to get that TRICARE care for my lifetime.
Mhm.
Why do I need to go to Medicare? Now it's just more aggravation where you got to go into a doctor and give another set of numbers. Then you got to give your TRICARE. We need to start simplifying things for veterans and
I would
disabled
agree.
veterans.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the full range and spectrum of veterans benefits, it's amazing how hard you have to fight to take care of people who have preserved freedom for this country. And I mean, like for me, as a retired colonel, I mean, people roll out the red carpet for me. They take care of me. I have had some issues with like medical care here in Colorado just because like through referrals and stuff. And I kept thinking to myself, man, if I'm struggling to take care of this issue, imagine somebody that did 4 years, got out as a Lance Corporal or whatever, specialists in the Army. I mean, like imagine how they're treated, And I mean, I went out to the facility out here in Aurora for an MRI last year for my knee. And I mean, that woman was incredibly rude to me when I checked in, just like whatever, just you're another face, shut up, blah, blah, blah. And there were so many people, and I'm able-bodied, right? But you see people walking around missing an arm or a leg, and they're getting treated like that. And then I take a look at the elected officials in the state who have done nothing to help veterans. They have done nothing, And so really what it comes down to is whoever runs that VA facility, I go to the one in Golden, Colorado, and they run it pretty well. The people there are pretty good. They take good care of you, but that's not true everywhere you go. And nationwide, we need to do a better job of stepping up to making sure that access to these benefits is very quick, simple, and easy. No red tape, no bureaucracy or any of that kind of thing. And then, basically give back to them and show that appreciation for what they did and those sacrifices they made. So I'm 100% behind any type of improvement in overall care and benefits for our veterans.
And two more things, but I know you probably have a lot of stops to go to. If you look at Vietnam veterans, I think there needs to be a policy that if you served in combat, you were in a combat zone and you saw combat, you have a combat action badge, a combat infantry badge, or you were in combat. When you get out, you should automatically be 100% service connected disabled, and then work down with your team to see if, like, you shouldn't have to fight for that. It should be given to you, and then let them work and find out, do you really need all that care or that designation? Or Vietnam veterans, they're still fighting.
Mhm.
Vietnam veterans. Now,
Yeah.
here's a funny thing. In 2019, I worked with Lee Zeldin on the liver fluke bill. You have to look up liver fluke. It's crazy. It's this parasite that's only found in Southeast Asia. You probably know about it, but that it's dormant in your system. It could be dormant for 30, 40 years. And then when it comes out, it starts causing cancer. It's called liver fluke. I found out about this in 2014. I also have a 501(c)(3) called Veteran Recovery Coalition, where I help
Mhm.
veterans in need with bills and medical bills. The car doesn't run, Christmas presents for the kids, whatever. And this guy came to me, said he's got liver fluke and the VA won't handle it. So he got Lee Zeldin to create a congressional study. Guess what they did last year
What's that?
in Congress? They started a congressional study on liver fluke. So
Hmm.
they started one in 2019, did
Hmm.
nothing until 2025, and then started a liver fluke study. Why not treat these people the minute they come in? You have
Hmm.
cancer, you have this, you have that. It's fully covered by the VA. It doesn't matter what it is. You served, cover this stuff, and then later on find out, did you really get this cancer from being in the service or did it come from something else? And seriously, does it really matter? They served. Like they spend more time and getting more PTSD just by, I bet more people get PTSD from dealing with the VA than they do from being overseas.
Sure. Well, particularly, Vietnam was a unique conflict. And my dad served on the Quad Viet River in Vietnam in 68, 69, and was exposed also to Agent Orange and developed lung cancer in 2016. He left Vietnam in 1969 and developed lung cancer all those years later. And eventually contributed to other health problems, and he passed away last year. He would have been 80 this year. But I mean, all those Vietnam veterans, they're in their 70s and 80s now. And the things that they were exposed to, that are have latent delayed effects in terms of, health problems and all that, are truly noteworthy and probably above and beyond any other conflict that we've read about or, know about. And in particular, like my dad, was he had to fight like hell to get additional compensation after he developed that cancer because he's like, hey, look, this is Agent Orange. I was repeatedly exposed to this on a riverboat for a year, and I mean, it took him, I think 2 or 3 years to actually finally get somebody to, take the case, and then eventually got compensation for it. But by that point, it was too late, and his health just started to deteriorate. But I mean, how many more are out there like him? I watched him go through that, and and so it's just one of those things where I think we need to understand the unique aspects of each one. Like the conflicts I served in, everything from depleted uranium, burn pits, all these types of things where, you're exposed to all these airborne pathogens and hazards and stuff. I mean, I did a good job of documenting that, but not every veteran does. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, sometimes like they come back later and go, hey, look, I didn't document this. I'm documenting it now. And they have to jump through hoops for years to get an extra 10% or whatever it is. So I think we just need to help streamline these things so people get what they rate and then they can move on with their lives.
I was told earlier, and then I'll leave it at this so you can get on with your day. I don't want to hold you too long. I was telling Lieutenant Governor Evet, there's 350,000 veterans in South Carolina.
Mhm.
So I asked her, how many votes is that? She said 300 and whatever, it's 20,000. I said, no, it's probably, if they're all married, let's just assume three-quarters are married. It's probably close to 500,000 veterans. And let's just say quarter of them have children over the age of 18. You're talking about probably 500 to 600,000 veteran families that can vote. If someone's a center Democrat and you help their father get their benefits that they deserve and that they earned, you help them get the service at the VA that they earned, those family members are going to put aside all their other BS because they know how much their father or mother is suffering from bad care, not getting their benefits. And when someone steps up and takes care of that, people will cross party lines and say, you took care of my father, you took care of my mother. I can't even get up my stairs. I got to use both railings. If someone was to come up with a bill that helped me, my kids, and then they're only 11 and 15, but they would recognize that. And they would
Mhm.
put everything else aside, all this other BS and this noise in this world, and say, here's someone who acted and did
Right.
something positive for someone I love. So that's why I focus on these issues so hard with candidates, because I know one is it's a winning demographic when you help them, and it's the right thing to do. Too many of us are suffering, too many veterans. I have a great family, so I have a great support system, but there are those who don't. They become part of that 22 a day, which doesn't,
Right.
22 a day doesn't incorporate, that's just a successful, I hate that word, successful suicides. What about the suicide attempts or the thought of suicide?
Yeah, ideations, yeah.
It's the numbers double that. So
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, more than that. I mean, that was, the tail end of my career. I did a chief of staff job 3 times at the tail end of my career. So I was running massive organizations and digging into every issue. And one of the most prominent ones that came up was suicidal behaviors, so behavioral health. And I took it upon myself to really dig into that and figure out what was going on, and increase access to, medical providers and things like that. But also just, it actually goes back to the beginning of the conversation was, a lot of them came into the service without any kind of real role model or masculine influence in their life. And they started to encounter adversity and they didn't have the resilience to push through it. And they would say things like, I want to harm myself. And they'd have to go to the ER. And after that, they were usually okay. But it was an incredible and alarming amount of people that were, some reason, defaulting to that type of behavior. And I realized that we had an anxiety and depression crisis across society that was feeding into the military and then exacerbated by the stresses that we encounter every single day. And so, you heard about the 22 a day. I mean, I used to do the push-up challenge and that kind of stuff with my guys, and we were always trying to help people. But I mean, it is like if you look at all the suicidal behaviors, it's not due to combat stress. It's due to everyday stress that people are ill-equipped to deal with. And so, just trying to help people find and access and employ the tools to do better. But that breaks my heart when people say things like that, like or they want to end their life or they make an attempt or whatever, when they have so much to live for and they have a lot for which to be proud. And so I try to, be that kind of influence. I tell my own story about challenges I had in my life, things I had to overcome, and say, look, I'm not perfect. I'm a human. I've made mistakes. I've had challenges just like you. It doesn't matter if I'm a colonel or not. And I was able to overcome it by doing these kinds of things. And you can too, and you provide them that kind of help and assistance and that mentorship. But I mean, that is a widespread problem that still I do not think has come to a head yet. And so I think we need to confront that head on.
I just wrote a Substack about this where I did a study, and a lot of what you're talking about it comes from kids, mostly men, who grew up in fatherless homes.
That's right. Number one
And there's
reason.
not a
Yep.
father.
Yeah.
Like when my son falls and he's about to, the little lip starts going, I said, get up. And I
Yep.
know it hurts. And it hurts me. I said, get up. What are you really crying about? Well, it hurts. I said, but that's all it is. It's not broken. I remember when he broke his wrist, just as we were moving down here, I heard it. So I wasn't saying, get up, you little baby. I heard it when he
Mhm.
slipped off the monkey bars.
Mhm.
I was just like, let's go to the hospital. And I coddled him. But, it's fatherless homes. It's
Yep.
two people in that household. But, sir, listen, I don't want to hold you up all day. I'm sure you have other stops to go to. Um, is there anything else you want to let our people know?
Well, just that, the reason why I'm doing this is one reason, and that's a call to serve. It's something that, like I, explained in the beginning with my family. It's in our blood. And once I left the military a couple of years ago, I worked in the private sector and things are great, but I thought that call to serve was still there. And I felt that there weren't enough people that were willing to step up and take on these challenges at a national level and also to help the state of Colorado. Instead, people were, on the sidelines complaining, and I thought, well, that's not what I do. I'm going to step up and be part of the solution, help solve problems, lead, and then let the people know that there's somebody that's gonna, stand up for them, and represent them, and who is, comes from them, right? I mean, I was born from a very, very, I would say, middle class upbringing, nothing special. We were just raised on good American values. And the biggest things that I bring to the table, I think, besides just the experience and education, is integrity and moral courage. And a lot of people feel that's lacking in Washington, a lot of our elected officials. And someone needs to go in there and fight for them and take the battle to DC. And so that's why I'm doing this, because people deserve someone that will step up and act selflessly in their behalf. And so appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much for the endorsement. This is a great organization. Thank you for the work you do, just writ large. If it weren't for people like you, I don't know where this country would be. And so, the fact that you stepped up and had the courage to do this, it's admirable, and I definitely appreciate it.
Just like you, sir, we retire, but we still want to serve. And
Mhm.
they say legislative bodies legislate, they make bills, and the leaders are the CEOs and the presidents and governors. But um, in that Senate, we need more leaders. We
Right.
need less politicians, less bill writers. Hire someone in your office to help you write a bill, but lead. And
Mhm.
I think you're the guy to do it. So congratulations. We will be with you step by step and doing whatever we can to help you cross that line.
Thank you. I appreciate the support and looking forward to working with you.
Sir, it's an honor. Once again, this is Robert Cornicelli, National President for Veterans for America First, here with Colonel Markert running for Senate in Colorado. This guy is a hero. He's a patriot. He's a great American, and he's going to make one of the greatest senators this country has ever seen. Thank you once again, Colonel.
Thank you.